I, 25 years old female, am getting married to my fiancé, 29 years old male, in May. When we first got together, he told me that he was married from 22 years old to his high school sweetheart. We met when he was 25, but she passed away from sepsis from a botched surgery. He didn't cope well and stayed in contact with her family, namely father and two sisters, 19 and 24. It was a soft spot for me for a while at the beginning, because there was so much history they had that we would not have, and it was tough knowing that she was all around him. I never told him, and decided to work through it on my own, especially with the fact that he would often spend time with her family during our relationship. Her birthday, their anniversary, and the anniversary of her death, he'd spend the day with her family. It was uncomfortable at first, knowing the man I loved was reminiscing about love he had with someone else, but I kept trying to see it from his perspective. And the last couple years, I am completely secure in our relationship, and it doesn't bother me much anymore. Well, he proposed this time last year, and I was over the moon. I love this man with all my heart, but I recently learned that he never told them that we got engaged. I've been trying local coffee shops the past few months rather than my usual run and tried a new one. His late wife's sister worked there, and other than being awkward, she did a double take of my engagement ring and looked really unhappy. I didn't mention it and left. My fiancé told me that she kept messaging him on social media about it, and I wasn't happy that he kept it a secret. He apologized and was very depleted by it all. He said that he didn't want to hide me, but he didn't want to hurt them either, and that both of us were a huge part of his life. I understand that and let him off the hook slightly, just told him to be upfront with them from now on. That was that. At least I thought so. A week ago, on Sunday, I got a message from the 24-year-old asking if I was happy with myself, that I would never replace his late wife and that if she was still alive, he'd choose her over me every time. She even said that he only kept me around for my money and something to stick his DCK in. I ignored it, but I can't say that it didn't affect me. When you're in my position, all these points are ones you have to work through, and it's not easy to get over those insecurities. It feels like a knock in the teeth when they're used against you. I mentioned it to him, and he comforted me and reassured me. He said he'd set boundaries with her and I'd never have to hear from her again. Fine by me. That was until I found my car with a and grave robber smeared in red paint. I had saved for this car for a year, and it was expensive, very expensive. The tires were slashed and the windows cracked. I asked the store a few doors down for their CCTV camera footage of that night, but it was blurry and didn't catch much. It did manage to catch half a license plate, though, and the color and make of a car. It was his late wife's youngest sister's car. I told him I was filing a police report, and he asked me to hold off until he talked to them first. I told him no, but I would if they paid for the damages and apologized to my face. He set up the meeting for last night, and it didn't go well, to say the least. Everyone was shouting. The sisters told me they, yes, both of them, had nothing to be sorry for, and that I should leave their family alone, including my fiancé and their family. He told them that it wasn't fair to him to be lonely forever and that he'd hoped they'd be supportive of him finding love again. They told him he was betraying his late wife and that he never loved her if he'd marry someone else. They didn't have a problem with him having a new girlfriend because he'd realize she was the only one for him and get tired of me. Now that hadn't happened, they were putting their foot down. The youngest told him to tell me that they were right and that he'd never love anyone like his late wife. My fiancé broke down at the table. I picked him up and made us leave. I told them I'd be filing a report and suing for damages, and the next time they saw us would be in court. When we got back and calmed down, I gave him an ultimatum. Either he cuts contact or we call off the wedding and go our separate ways. I wasn't going to live my life with this harassment and someday subject my children to their bullying. He said they would never bully a child, but I shot him down and said he didn't expect any of this either. He called their father, who was fairly chill about it all but still defending his daughters. They say I shouldn't control him, and that I'm horrible for cutting them off. I don't know what to do. I can't live like this, and I don't think I should have to just because we're getting married. P's links. Mini edit. Update. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. What they did is completely unacceptable, and I'm glad you're standing your ground and filing the police report. Look into a restraining order as well. since you must still have all the proof of the messages and such. As for your fiancé, I understand why he kept in touch with them, but he messed up big time by not telling them he's moved on and loves someone else. He's hidden you from them, which is stupid, as what did he expect? He needs to grow a backbone and put them in their place. Comment 2, not the idiot. I understand why he keeps in touch with them and views them as family, but if my family treated a partner this way, I'd go no contact until they could treat us both with respect. He may be dealing with some guilt about moving on, but if you can work through your hang-ups regarding this, so can he. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around. A lot has happened since my last post. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. The day after the disastrous meeting with his late wife's sisters, my fiancé came home from work early, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Turns out he'd been fired. His boss had somehow gotten wind of the family drama and decided it was bad for the company image. I was furious. How could they do that to him? It's not like he'd done anything wrong. But that wasn't the end of it. That night, we got a call from the hospital. His late wife's father had a heart attack. Despite everything, my fiancé rushed over there. I stayed home feeling like an outsider in my own life. When he came back, he was different. He said that in the hospital, his late wife's father had made him promise to always look after his daughters. My fiancé agreed out of respect for the man lying in the hospital bed. I felt like screaming. It was like no matter what happened, no matter how much they walked all over us, he couldn't stand up for himself, for us. I was being pushed aside, again, for the sake of his past. The next day, I got a call from my own boss. The sisters had been spreading rumors about me at my workplace, calling me a homewrecker and worse. I was put on administrative leave until things cooled down. I couldn't believe it. My career, something I'd worked so hard for, was being jeopardized by their lies. I confronted my fiancé. I told him that his inability to set boundaries was costing us our livelihoods, our reputations, and our future. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said he didn't know what to do. He was torn between his past and his future, and it was tearing us apart. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. I needed space to think, to breathe. I needed to figure out if this relationship was worth the constant battle. A few days later, my fiancé showed up at my friend's place. He had made a choice. He told me he'd cut off all contact with his late wife's family. He'd realized that our future together was more important than being trapped by his past. He showed me the messages he'd sent them, telling them he needed to move on for his own sake. I was shocked. It was the first time he'd really stood up for himself, for us. It felt like a weight had been lifted. But there was still the matter of the vandalism and the rumors. We had to clear our names. We went to the police with the evidence we had, and they opened an investigation. It wasn't long before they had enough to charge the youngest sister with the vandalism. As for the rumors, we got a lawyer and sent cease and desist letters to the sisters. It was a small victory, but it felt like a turning point. We're slowly rebuilding our lives now. My fiancé found a new job, and I was cleared to return to work. The wedding is still on, but it'll be a small affair, just close friends and family who support us. It's not the fairy tale I imagined, but it's real, and it's ours. Thanks for reading. My girlfriend of 6 years dumps me for another guy and abandons her nephew, so I take the kid and build a better life without her. I, 24-year-old male, had been dating my ex-girlfriend Priya, 27-year-old female, for 6 years. She was the perfect woman for me. She was kind, smart, driven, and beautiful. I fell in love with her as soon as I interacted with her in college, and I was happy in this relationship. Priya's older sister passed away in 2019 and left behind a son, Abhinav, who was 7 years old at the time. It was a tough time for Priya's family, and I tried to support her as much as I could. Her brother-in-law remarried in 2021. Before getting married, he met with Priya's parents and told them that Abhinav couldn't live with him anymore because his new wife didn't want him around. Her parents decided it would be better to take him in than for him to live in a place where he was not wanted. As they lived in a different state and could not move away, they are landowners. They wanted Priya to take him in, and she agreed. My respect for her increased because she was just starting her career, and she was ready to raise her nephew. Her parents bought her a new apartment and lived with her for a few months. They paid for all of Abhinav's expenses and hired a full-time nanny before returning to their state. She introduced me to her parents before they left, and they loved me. I spent as much time with Abhinav as possible because I felt bad for him. We played video games together, and Priya took him to movies and amusement parks. I used to love watching Pixar movies with him whenever he and Priya came over to my place. The Incredibles was his favorite movie. My parents loved having Abhinav over. There were times when they used to watch him whenever Priya and I went out on dates on weekends. They insisted on watching him even if they knew that he had a nanny, and he loved them and called them his grandparents. I do enjoy having him around and think of him as my sibling. My perfect life came crashing down almost a year ago. Priya called me and told me she needed to talk with me, and I called her over to my place. As soon as she walked in, I knew something was wrong. She sat me down and told me not to be mad at her. She said she had been talking to Abhinav about her wanting to marry me, and he just looked sad whenever she mentioned this. One of these times, he said that he did not want her to get married to anyone because he was afraid that she would also abandon him like his father. As soon as I heard this, I felt sad because this kid thought that we would throw him away like his piece of shoot father. Somehow, I kept my composure and asked her what she had said to him. As soon as I asked this, she started crying and told me that she did not say anything. She just sat there. I just kept staring at her, and she went on to explain that she did not want him around when we got married because she had this picture of a perfect family in her mind where we just lived with our kids. My love for her just vanished at that moment. What she had said was so out of character that I thought I was dreaming. To be honest, I wanted to break up with her on the spot, but I thought that if I did leave her, she would blame Abhinav for it and she would kick him out. As soon as she left, I started looking for therapists for Abhinav because he was going through so much, and he did not want to share these things with me. 2 weeks later, he started therapy, and for the most part, he seems happier. My love for Priya died, but I kept on acting as if everything was fine, so that she did not blame Abhinav for the eventual breakup. The way she acted with Abhinav after that day just showed me I was right. She never wanted to hang out whenever I made plans with Abhinav. She didn't bring Abhinav along whenever we visited my parents' place unless I forced her to. It was as if she was slowly trying to isolate him. I had always planned to pursue an MBA in Australia, and with what happened, I did not feel guilty about going there. I got into a good university there and told Priya about this, and she was happy for me. I left India in September, and we were long distance all this time. I finally broke up with her last week, and she went ballistic. She is telling everyone we knew that I left her after wasting 6 years of her life. I am losing friends over this because they think I am a jerk, and I left her after I used her for 6 years. I have not told anyone but my parents that I can't build my life with a woman who is ready to abandon a kid because he does not fit her ideal image of a family. For the last year, whenever I saw her face, I kept thinking that if we had kids and something happened to me, she would be ready to abandon our kids for a new man. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I would tell the grandparents what she said and leave it at that. She is going ballistic because she is now solely responsible for a child she doesn't want and wanted to get rid of. Tell them to keep the kid in therapy, and if they can, take him in because she doesn't want him. Comment 2. If this is true, you kind of are a jerk. You should have told her that abandoning the boy would be absolutely despicable. You should have told her she can't do that to an innocent child and talked it through like an adult. Now for the update, thanks for sticking around for another update. So I thought things couldn't get worse, but life has a funny way of proving you wrong. After breaking up with Priya, I was trying to settle into my new life in Australia, focusing on my MBA, but then, out of the blue, I got a call from Priya's mom. She was crying, saying Priya had moved out of the apartment they bought her, leaving Abhinav behind. She said Priya had met someone else and didn't want any baggage. My blood boiled hearing that. Abhinav was now alone, with just the nanny for company. Priya's parents couldn't leave their land and responsibilities, and they begged me to come back and help. I was torn. I had my studies, a new life. But then there was Abhinav, the kid I'd come to see as a little brother. I made a decision that would change everything. I told them I'd take care of Abhinav. I arranged for him to come to Australia with his nanny. It was a huge move, but I couldn't leave him to fend for himself. The transition was rough. Abhinav missed his home, his grandparents, and even Priya, despite everything. I had to juggle my studies and his schooling, but we managed. It was during this time that I found out Priya had been cheating on me for the last year of our relationship. It stung, but it also made things clearer. I wasn't the bad guy here. She was. She'd spun a web of lies, and I was just caught in it. Then, another bomb dropped. Priya's new man was actually her boss, and she was pregnant. She'd planned this whole thing, the breakup, the move, everything. She wanted a clean slate, and Abhinav and I were just obstacles. Her parents were devastated. They'd lost a daughter in more ways than one. I was angry, sure, but more than that, I felt a deep sense of betrayal. I'd loved her, and she'd used me. But there was no time to dwell on it. Abhinav needed me, and I had to be there for him. We settled into a routine, and he started to do well in school. He even made a few friends, which was a big step for him. Life was starting to look up, but then the nanny had to leave due to a family emergency back in India. I was left to care for Abhinav alone. It was tough, but we managed. I learned to cook his favorite meals, helped with his homework, and we'd talk about his day before bed. It was during these talks that I realized how much he'd grown, how resilient he was. He'd been through so much, yet he still smiled, still laughed. As for Priya, she tried to reach out once, probably out of guilt. I didn't want to hear it. I was done with her lies and manipulation. I had a new priority now, and that was Abhinav. I was all he had, and I wasn't going to let him down. So here we are, 2 weeks into this new chapter. It's not easy, but when I see Abhinav sleeping peacefully, I know I made the right choice. I've accepted this new reality. Even if it's not what I planned, it's hard, but it's worth it. Thanks for reading. My boyfriend pressured me to share my past, so his friends could judge my worthiness, but when he proposed at my job, I had security drag him out and watched his life fall apart as his mistress revealed their affair and pregnancy. I, a 24-year-old woman, was dating a 28-year-old man for a year and 3 months, and it was good at the beginning. I know people say there are signs about certain types of behavior, or you can see like bits and pieces of who somebody is, but this man was so good about hiding who he was. Last week, my ex-boyfriend, his 2 friends, their girlfriends and I all went out to a cabin for a week and a half. I got along great with the girls, and his friends seemed nice as well. About 2 days in, we decided to play truth or dare to break the ice. I chose truth for a round, and his friend asked me my body count, and I tried to change the subject because it's my first time meeting you. You don't need to be in my business? I declined to answer, and my boyfriend got very quiet and looked upset. I asked him what was wrong, and he said nothing. We continue the game, and his other friend dares me to tell my body count. I say no. 3 more rounds, and the first friend asks me when I lost my virginity. I call it a night and say I'm not comfortable sharing my intimacy history with people I've known for 5 seconds. My ex-boyfriend goes, "Oh, you wouldn't have to be uncomfortable if you don't have anything to hide, and you haven't slept with a large amount of people." I look at him and tell him I don't have to tell these strangers anything about my personal life. We get into a small argument. I go upstairs for the night. The next day rolls around, and one of the guy's girlfriends comes up to me and tells me that she heard him talking about a different plan to get me to talk about how many people I've been with previously, because my boyfriend doesn't want a S for a wife, and not telling him is making him have second thoughts about wanting to marry me. I go alone to confront him about what he said, and he said yes, that he got them to try and ask me how many people I've slept with, because he didn't want to offend me by asking himself. I asked him why it mattered, and he told me that he didn't want anybody that was promiscuous to be his wife and the mother of his future children. I asked about his body count, and he tells me that it shouldn't matter because men are different, that women are the ones who give access to men to sleep with them, and it's up to them to stay pure and blah, blah, blah. I told him if he has a problem that I've slept with people before him, then we shouldn't be together. He got so angry and told me that my time is running out and no one's going to want anybody over the age of 25 because they're used up. Don't listen. Men prefer younger women because they're easier to mold. Like, you? I told him I was done and I'm leaving, And do not contact me after I leave because I do not want to be in a relationship with somebody who views women in this way. I packed my things, and while I was doing it, he kept saying that I'm making a mistake, that he didn't mean it and that he just wanted to know and he was just curious. When I was heading downstairs, his 2 friends sat there and he started being misogynistic again and told me that I'm old and used up and nobody's gonna want me and I'd be lucky to marry him. I told him that he'd be lucky if anybody was going to be desperate to marry someone who still pees on the toilet seat, and with that receding hairline and that bald patch starting in the middle of his head. His friends started laughing, and he got so upset that he ran out of the house. I left, and now he's contacting me all over social media and making different phone numbers to text me and say I embarrassed him, that I'm a witch, and going back and forth between, I want to work this out with you, I'll get help, etc. I keep blocking his number, but he keeps making more, so I'm going to change my number. My mom told me that I shouldn't have gone below the belt with the hairline and bald patch comment, but call me a intimacy lover, promiscuous, and I'm old. Oh well. Info. We played this game as an icebreaker. We're adults. If someone doesn't want to answer, I would think you'd respect that and move on. Also, it was a couple's weekend getaway, which is why I went on the trip. I hadn't been on a vacation since before nursing school. If he asked before this elaborate BS, I would have gladly told him. I didn't have an issue with telling him. Just people I didn't know. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Your mom is part of the doormat society because on which planet is it okay to intimacy lover shame someone with all the bells and whistles, but mentioning their receding hairline is too far? Laughing my butt off, ignore her. Not the idiot. He got mad because 1, he didn't get the reaction he expected from you, and 2, you didn't lie. Well done, OP. Laughing emoji. Comment 2. Laughing my butt off. He thinks 25-year-olds are old? Girl, you're so young. I met my husband at 28. I didn't get married for years later. You could add 10 years to your age and still be fine. Many people don't get married until their mid-30s. You did right, not the idiot. Now for the update, thanks for sticking around for the update. So after I changed my number, I thought I'd finally shaken him off. But nope. 2 days later, I'm at work. And guess who shows up? My ex. He's standing there in the lobby, flowers in hand, looking like a kicked puppy. I'm thinking, what the heck is he doing here? I'm a nurse, and this is a hospital, not some rom-com set. My supervisor sees him first, and bless her, tries to handle it. But he insists on seeing me, making a scene about how he's here to apologize. I agree to talk to him, but only because I want to avoid further drama at my workplace. We step into a private room, and he starts with his sob story, saying he's been to therapy, he's changed, and he's sorry. He wants me back, promising the moon and stars. I'm standing there, arms crossed, thinking, is this guy for real? I tell him it's too late. That ship has sailed, and he needs to leave. But he won't budge. He drops to one knee right there and pulls out a ring. A ring. In front of my colleagues, patients, everyone, he's proposing. I'm mortified. I tell him to get up and that this isn't the time or place. He starts pleading, and I have to call security to escort him out. My heart's racing, and I'm embarrassed beyond belief. My supervisor gives me the rest of the day off because honestly, who could work after that? I go home, trying to shake off the humiliation, when I get a text from one of the girlfriends from the cabin trip. She says she's sorry for everything and that she needs to talk to me. It's urgent. I'm wary, but agree to meet her at a coffee shop. She shows up looking nervous and drops the news. She's been seeing my ex behind her boyfriend's back. She's pregnant and doesn't know what to do. She's telling me because she feels guilty and thought I should know the kind of man he really is. I'm sitting there, coffee forgotten, trying to process this. I tell her she needs to figure things out and maybe come clean to her boyfriend. I'm not getting involved. I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. I leave the shop feeling a mix of anger and pity. It's a mess, and I'm glad I'm out of it. The next day, I'm back at work, and it's like nothing happened. I'm doing my rounds, focusing on my patients, when I get a call from my mom. She's frantic, saying there's been a break-in at my place. I rush home, and it's been trashed. My heart sinks. I know it's him. The police come, and I file a report. They say they'll look into it, but I'm not holding my breath. I spend the next few days cleaning up and staying with a friend. I'm angry, scared, and just tired of it all. But then, something unexpected happens. My ex gets arrested. Not for the break-in, but because he got into a fight at a bar and someone got hurt. He's in jail, and suddenly all his calls and texts stop. It's like I can finally breathe again. I go back to my place, put everything back in order, and life starts to feel normal. I'm not saying I'm happy about how things turned out for him, but I can't help but feel relieved. I'm free from his chaos, and I can move on. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.